Thank you. Thank you, Exchange for Media, Karan, Anurag, Naval, for having us on this program. Always good to be back. So, listen, this is going to be a free-flowing discussion. Please, in the middle of the discussion, if you raise your hand, we'll be happy to answer any questions. So, we want to keep it as engaging as possible. So, I've got Yashika with me, who's had immense experience in managing media and government policy, and now she's doing it for a great brand like PepsiCo. So I'm going to kick off Yashika very quickly with some questions. But just starting off with really the big picture, right? So from your vantage point at PepsiCo, how do you feel has this role of corporate affairs really evolved in the country, especially with this lens around equity and sustainability?
Thanks so much, Nitin. Nitin did not tell me that he will open it up as like an open house where anybody picks, raises the hand to ask questions, which makes this extremely worrying because he's asking me a question which, in a room full of experts on the topic, right? But let me sort of give my point of view on it. I'm sure there are so many others which could add to that. How has, corporate affairs evolved? That was the question, right? Yeah. So. I think about 10 years back, all of us, many of us who are in this room, we started to talk about how corporate affairs and corporate communication is now a strategic function, and we have a space in the, on the XCOM tables, and we finally got there where we are driving strategy and not just seen as a support function. And we clapped for ourselves about, 10, 15 years back. And I'm not sure how much of that goodwill lasted, right? Because on a day-to-day basis, our teams are sort of drawn into dealing with crisis and dealing with issues. And as I was joking with Nitin, I woke up this morning and the world was ending on 2 separate emails in my inbox, and that's what it comes down to. But I think the one difference is that in the past 10 years, a decade and a half, most of us who do this function understand the strategic nature of it, right? So even if we may be at different places with our internal XCOM members on trying to understand how we are, how much space we have on the table, but all of us get it. And I think that's a big change, right? The way we all perform that function, we think of it more strategically. And that's one sort of difference for me, and I've seen that, sort of lived through that. The other one is you mentioned sustainability and equity, right? And I think in my role, I do public policy, government affairs, comms, sustainability, as well as social impact. And the big change that I've seen is that we've had to learn new tools. Some of the new tools is that we need to understand sustainability more than just the headlines, right? It's not possible for us to be communicating on sustainability without understanding some of the technicalities. And that means that we need to develop that tool of understanding climate change and what does emissions mean and what does scope 3 mean. And it's no longer enough for us to know it from the outside, because the other thing that's happened is storytelling, right? More and more we are drawn into telling stories and telling stories from a very, very human-centric perspective. So it's not enough to say, XYZ, my company's net zero target is XYZ year. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to your stakeholders, to the people who are you trying to build your reputation with. If you can tell it as a story, which makes it central to them, that's when it drives the change that we are looking for from a reputation perspective. I don't know, it's the 4th or 5th. The other thing that's happened is measured metrics, right? We are seeing more and more of being drawn into quantitative measurements of the impact we make. Through surveys, through reputation analysis, through benchmarking, we are all being drawn into that, where it's no longer enough to say, yes, this was the earned media, this was, this is the number of stories that we did, or this is the events that we showed up at. What's the needle that you have moved, right? And I think we're being drawn more and more into that. And finally, I think the other big, which the previous panel was also talking about, the tyranny of geography is well recognized. I think we, particularly in India, particularly in the country that we all operate in, the previous panel touched upon it beautifully, but that's something that's happened as well, that there is no one way of telling a story. You have to adapt, else you're not making an impact.
Oh, absolutely. Wow, that was like a wide range. So you're dealing with media and policymakers, sustainability, equity, all in a single day. So that's quite a handful, and so much to learn. And when I say learn, I think you're right. We are no longer. We have to go deep into various topics. And you talked about geographies. And you talked about the previous panel talking about India. But how does, and just as a follow up to my first question, how is India or the Indian role different from your counterparts globally? Is it very different? Is it similar?
I mean, definitely there are sort of similarities. In one of the similarities is one of the things that I spoke about with regard to being measured for impact. I think that's similar. Telling human-centric stories, that is similar. Where India becomes interesting for all of us is the diversity, right? And very often it's very difficult to explain to global or regional counterparts the diversity of India. I mean, now of course it's India has its place in the sun. People have to understand India. People outside the country have to understand India. So people get it. They get it at that level that it's a diverse country. But what does it mean from an execution or delivery perspective? That is where the difference is. We are literally culturally different in many.
Just a complex market.
Yeah, very complex, and that's something that differs for us.
If you ask some of my North America colleagues, and they said Asia, I said no, Asia is very diverse. Yeah. If you go from Korea down to Australia, there's a lot in between that we don't see. So you talked about storytelling earlier. That one of the things is about how do you bring stories to life. So I know you have some very strong and PEP Plus goals at PepsiCo, right? So how do you bring those to life from an equity lens and sustainability lens?
Yeah, I think how do you bring, and Nitin, you and I have had this chat outside. I think the way to, one is to do it first, right? To go about trying to talk purpose without having done something first is I'm sure everybody in this room agrees, is a very bad idea. And I think that time when we made commitments but did not show execution on those commitments, that time's gone, right? We are way past that. When it was maybe a few years back or 10 years back, it was sufficient for companies to showcase, to announce commitments, Now that's not good enough, right? That time is gone, and now we're being asked more and more that, okay, you've made the commitments, show us the results, right? And I think so that therefore, first is doing it, right? Like for example, let me take an example, right? We have some well-loved brands. Lay's is one of our most well-loved, consumers love it. The amount of passion that's around buying a packet of chips and the flavors.
Let me tell you a little story before you start.
Yeah.
My Singapore colleagues asked me to get a carton full of Lay's.
From
here.
Yeah.
I was like, I said, what do you want from me? They said, can you just get us
masala,
Lay's?
Masala. Yeah, the masala Lay's. Yeah, it's such a fan favorite, right? And then we did without sort of, thinking about it, about the brand, we did a lot of work around PepsiCo Positive, which is what we call our sustainability agenda. Globally, we call it PepsiCo Positive. We did a lot of work on working on such things as regenerative agriculture, which really means is because we are the single largest buyer of potatoes in India, when we work with 27,000 farmers in India, we are ensuring that we are also working with them to replenish the soil quality. Okay. So we are doing things like, setting up soil testing facilities, ensuring that there are agronomists, as Vaishali was referring to earlier as well, under the Yara conversation, they have agronomists who are going out there working with the farmers to check the soil, to ensure that the crop is one, sustained over a long period of time and the yields get better, right? And then we were doing this happily in one area and Lay's was sitting in another area. And then we were like, oh my God, these are the potatoes that make those brilliant chips. And the moment we had that example and we had all the data was started to come in on what an impact it makes to farmer lives when we are doing this sort of work, or to even community lives, because we are setting up agricultural entrepreneurs. So we call them Mitti Didi, which is women entrepreneurs who are being provided soil testing machines, who are then working in a region, working with the farmers in that region, allowing them to test it. And we were like, oh, this is helping make the potato that makes that chips which people are asking for from all over the world. And then we told that story. And we had all this data, we had proof. We did not start out by saying, oh, Lay's needs a story on this. No, we first did that work, and then we made the connection that, oh, this is a Lay story. And I don't know if it's been seen, and I don't know if perhaps my team should have provided that film. Is this, we call it Mitti Ki Chitti. It's a film that we did recently, and where the concept of the film is that Mother Earth is talking back to the Mitti Didi and telling her, how much she's looked after. And the fact that that film, the beauty of that film, it connects back to our chips. And I think that is how we tell that story, and we do that. And then so I think this is an important trait, for comms professionals to dig out stories internally. I mean, in very large I don't know about others, but in very large organizers such as PepsiCo, we may have a lot of interventions, but the silos exist. So the agro team is doing all this beautiful work, and the sustainability team is doing all this beautiful work, but the comms team is not aware of it, right? And so another huge trait that's coming up is how do you dig up these stories and then connect the dots? Because the agro team and the sustainability team would not have connected the dots that the communication and the marketing team would have connected.
No, I agree. I mean, amazing how much passion you have, which comes across on this. So for those who haven't seen the film, do Google it on YouTube and Mitti Ki Chitti and take a look at it. So I was at Cannes this year, last week actually, and we saw a lot of campaigns that were, one of the themes that came up was the jury wanted to see purpose with proof, right? And this is exactly a definition of purpose with proof, where you're doing a purposeful program and there is proof of a real change on the ground, right? One of the things, I mean, now let me switch back to my sort of agency avatar for a minute, and ask you. I mean, there are a lot of campaigns that you're doing, like you're saying, bringing out these nuggets and storytelling, etc. What does, in your position, what do you expect from your partners, whether it's a comms firm or somebody that's doing government affairs where you're working with, or your sustainability partners, whether it's an NGO working on ground? What is your larger expectations from your partners in your programs?
I'm going to take the long route to answering this question, as
Okay,
I've taken with every question that you've asked me. See, at PepsiCo, we have this philosophy, which you know really well, Nitin, partnership of progress, right? Yeah. We actually built it out together. So,
totally.
So that answers one question. But when we were putting together, what our thinking was that what does PepsiCo India stand for our stakeholders? And our stakeholders are our partners, such as yourself and other agencies that we work with, our farmers, our communities, our government, are the vendors and suppliers. All these are our partners for PepsiCo. And only when we are working together with this entire ecosystem of partners can we deliver on progress, and can we contribute to the immense potential of India, right, in our small way. So we do think of it, we think of partnership, that sits at the heart of how we work, whether when we're working with farmers or with communities or planning programs. Even when we plan programs with communities, we'll ensure that the community is equally involved, that we have done a baseline study, that we have asked them whether this is an requirement for them, right? And then we've got them as partnering with us in the delivery of it as well. So that is the philosophy. So when it comes down to what we expect, right? I think the agenda is so huge. For any company that's working in India, the agenda is so huge, right? So sometimes just that ease that comes from having somebody on the side who just gets it, how big the agenda is, and feels like they are there with you. I think it's an intangible thing, but it's that feeling, right? That's when long relationships happen between agencies and companies. When you feel like the other person's there for it, is helping you solve.
There for you, helping you solve, and
Yeah.
a
And think-
partner in your progress.
Yeah, and also
good
thinking
times and
through.
bad times.
Yeah, good times and bad times, right?
Yeah.
There'll be crisis and then there'll be celebrations. So I think that spirit of partnership, of doing it together, absolutely, that's what.
So being a good partner. Tell me, one of the
There is a
things
question,
is, there's a question. Yes, please go ahead.
I have two questions. One is the PepsiCo India is not publicly any stock, listed in any stock exchange. It's a wholly owned subsidiary company, and I believe 100% profit is going to the firm. Point number two, FSSAI. I'm sorry to use this word. FSSAI raised concern number of times in the past also on the salt, sugar, and fat, and they are raising issue on the less than 1.3 milligram per calorie to ensure the healthy snacks. So these are my two points.
Is there a question?
Yes.
So, yeah.
She's a corporate leader and
Yeah, so I don't know if there was a question. This both are. I mean, the first one is a fact. It's not listed in the country, and like many other MNCs, PepsiCo's. I don't think the.
That's way up. That's way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
So I wish I could tell you. That's way above my pay grade.
Yes.
On the second point, yes. On the,
this healthy snacks, most of your carbonated beverages and the snacks, the salty or sugar snacks. So
if I will respond, sir. I think I've got what you're saying. I'll give a response. I don't know if this will satisfy you, but I will respond, right? We think FSSAI is a very learned regulator. It's made up of a team of very talented people who have all the science and information available with them. The FSSAI as a regulator works very well with the industry, takes industry inputs. We, as a player in the industry, is very committed to meeting all the regulatory requirements that are placed on us. And every food and beverage item that is available in India will definitely meet the regulation as put out by FSSAI. That's all I'll say on
Yes,
that.
of course.
Yes.
So I know we've got times come up. We'll take a couple of more minutes. I think one of the questions which I wanted to ask was on internal, right? Because I think as corporate affairs, you also have to look at employees. So how do you, I mean, for this audience, how do you align your employees to your larger goals? Because that's a very important piece. Your employees are your best spokespeople eventually, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. They are your first ambassadors. Hey, but we again got selected in the Great Place to Work. We
Congratulations.
Are not, yes. This happened just yesterday, so very proud of that, and we'll be sort of talking more about it going forward. How do we work with employees? One is the tool, right? And I think I was talking to my team and the internal communications manager that we have, and I said, do we use WhatsApp? Should we use WhatsApp? Because it seems like it's very personalized. And he told me that's like spamming, So I think one is the tool. What do you tool? How do you engage? How do you ensure that you're talking to them enough? Is a town hall enough? Are mails being read or are they being deleted? How do you transfer that? One of the ways that I think that I'm a big votary of is bringing people to where we do the work, If it's HQ, bring them to your plants, okay? If it's people in the farms, get them into the HQ. Let each other see the lives of the other person.
Interesting.
Right?
That's brilliant.
And that's where pride comes from. Because if you're sitting in the manufacturing and if you're seeing the kind of work that's happening at the farm level, that's where pride comes from. The pride that we take in, the work that we do on soil or on water. How do you ensure that every person is seeing that? The best way for it is to experience it, right? So get your employees out there more. And while we figure out whether, WhatsApp is spamming or is actually delivering the message, but that's my one.
No, that's great. That's really interesting. So, I'll be wrapping up now. I know you're standing there to say, So, the only thing I'll say is, to wrap up is, we just did a recent study called Brands in Motion. Take a look at it if you Google Brands in Motion 2025. It says the world has become more complex. Therefore, communications has become even more complex. And while 80% of all of us, you, me, or a lot of us in the room, believe we're doing a great job, but it's only about half the people who really understanding that with clarity. So therefore, the importance of storytelling and the importance of being clear and clear in what you're communicating has become so important. So any last words
No,
for
absolutely.
advice for
I
people?
know. I think we're being shooed off.
Yeah.
I think to come back to data versus agility. Ensure that I mean, a lot of CEOs are put into a spot. We've seen some cases where they have said something and then it's become viral, and then the entire comms team is dealing with the crisis. Managing that balance of data and agility. How do you put out something that's verified, but in
Data with
as
agility.
quickly as possible, right? And getting that right. That's the balance that we all strive for.
Data with agility. Awesome. So Yashika, thank you for being here and thank you for taking out your time.
Thank
you.
you. It's been
No
an
doubt.
absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.